Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 54 of the Nurtured by Nature podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined in conversation by Reverend Rose Hope, author of the recently released book, The Ark, and CEO of Rose Hope Inc., based in Alberta, Canada. As we start a new year, it is perhaps important to be reminded of how powerful an ally hope is in our lives. During these challenging times, it is easy to feel overwhelmed and powerless to make a difference. We find ourselves burdened by the need to do something, but lost as to what, if any, hope remains amongst the devastation and destruction. In this beautiful conversation, Rose offers us her gentle but indispensable wisdom for times of turmoil, encouraging us to connect with the awe and wonder of the nature that surrounds us and is us, thus making space for our inner wisdom to flow as we begin the journey to remember who we truly are, raising the possibility of what we are capable of and increasing the vibration of love and compassion in our deeply divided world. We go on to discuss Rose's amazing book, The Ark, a fantasy fiction inspired by the likes of the Celestine Prophecy and The Alchemist. It draws on her incredible life from her own near-death experiences, her time working as an EMT, teaching health sciences, running her own holistic health company, and more recently delving into the spiritual realms and the wisdom of the Akashic records. She takes us on a journey to rediscover our own power, to create and raise the vibration of both ourselves and the collective consciousness, to bring heaven to earth. In times like these, we need to ask for help, take a breath, be prepared to listen, and receive the wisdom to move forwards with love in our hearts. Welcome, Rose Hope, and thank you so much for joining us today on the Nurtured by Nature podcast. I'm really looking forward to having the opportunity to speak to you today. I know we're going to have lots of amazing things to share with our listeners, but just to get us started, I always just ask my guests to share a little bit about their nature story and just really whatever nature has been to you, any fond memories you'd like to share to get us started. That would be amazing.
Oh, Fiona, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here. And we are nature, aren't we? And
Yeah.
so there's this beautiful relationship that I have been fostering over the years with my connection in the great outdoors and nature. And, for me, a lot of people, I grew up Catholic, and so we would go to
Okay.
church, and it felt really disconnected for me. And when I would go into the forest, I would feel God's presence there. I would feel
Yeah.
divine presence or creator's presence, whatever you call that. And so for me, being in nature is a sanctuary.
Yeah.
But being in nature has also brought me to some very interesting places. And I want to share a little story with you because this was such a profound impact for me in my life. I used to have a house down in Mexico in this little village, like not in a touristy area. We're like in the middle of nowhere.
Oh,
And
amazing.
one of the locals had told us about this beach that had seashells of all shapes and sizes.
Wow.
And so he drew us this little map to go on this adventure. Now, we have no idea where we're going. We just know that there's a village and then there's this sand road that's going to take us somewhere. And so we're guessing. We don't really know if we're going to find the place. And we find the village and then we find this road that isn't really a road. It's like a sand road. And we drive on this road, which feels like forever, but it's like 20 miles on the sand road. I also have to tell you, it was the middle of summer in Mexico. So it was plus 42 degrees
Oh,
Celsius
wow.
in
Wow.
Fahrenheit, but it's like
Yeah.
100 and some million
Yeah.
degrees. It was so hot. So anyway, we continue driving, wondering if we're going to get to where we go to. We see nobody. There's not a person in sight. We are in the middle of nowhere. And we go and we park. We find this beautiful beach, and literally the whole beach is seashells. And
Oh,
so we get
amazing.
out and we're collecting all these beautiful seashells. We hop in the ocean to cool off. We get back in the truck to leave, and the tires begin to spin.
Oh,
So we get out.
no.
I'm thinking, I'm from Alberta. I'm used to snow. Surely I can get out of sand.
Yeah.
Okay. And so we start digging and doing all these things. The harder we try to get out, the deeper we sink.
Wow.
So I go and I find our cell phones, no service. We are now stranded in the middle of the desert, 20 miles in plus 42 degrees.
Oh,
And
wow.
I am starting to panic now. Now, I have to tell everybody, I also watched Narcos Mexico the whole flight down. So if you watch that, my mind went to the cartel's gonna find us and kill us, or we're gonna walk into some big grow up or something, and surely we're gonna be dead. Like that's
Yeah.
my mind went to the irrational spot first.
Yeah.
And then
As we tend
reality,
to. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So then reality kicks in, and I'm like, how are we going to walk 20 miles through the desert? Like, we're in flip-flops, we
Yeah.
don't have a lot of water. It's 20 miles. Like,
Yeah.
that's not a small feat. And so I start to panic, fear kicks in. And I'm starting to pack things up. I don't know what we're going to do. My partner and I are having this conversation about, like, oh my gosh, like, should we go and break into one of these deserted houses over here? Like, there is nobody, okay? Like,
Yeah.
we had not seen a soul. And so I I'm packing a bag, and all of a sudden I hear, just take a breath. So I took that breath in, and when I took that breath in, gave me just enough room to hear the words start walking. Now, it didn't necessarily make sense for me to start
No.
walking right away. We hadn't figured out what we were going to do. My partner Dan is still trying to undig us. But I heard the message loud and clear. And so I listened. So I packed up the bag. I said to Dan, I said, I'm going to start walking. Like, you catch up to me. I didn't even know where I was going at this point. I was just walking towards where I thought the village
Yeah.
was. And so I start walking, and as I'm walking, I'm starting to pray because I don't know how I'm going to get through this. I'm feeling pretty nervous. And so I just say, please send an angel. Please send an angel. Like, I'm just desperate at this point.
Yeah.
And so I walk for a few feet, and by this time, Dan is now caught up to me. And we turn a corner, and all of a sudden, over the horizon comes a white 1-ton dually pickup truck with a winch on the front of it. You cannot make this stuff up, Fiona. So this truck that we needed, because
Yeah.
like if you've been to Mexico, you know that this isn't normal, right? Like you
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
see a vehicle that has the capability to pull another truck out ever. And so, anyways, this man, I said to Dan, I said, "Do you see what I'm seeing, or am I like making this up?
Yeah.
Because this doesn't
Yeah.
even make sense." And so, sure enough, this man drives up and he's like, "What are you guys doing out here? Like this is dangerous. There's nobody out here." And we're like, "Yeah, we know, and we're stuck." And so thankfully, by the good grace of this man, he got us unstuck. He used his winch, which barely worked. We were pretty stuck.
Yeah.
But he managed to get us out of there. And so he saved the day. And so he was that angel that I had asked for. And so
Wow.
this beautiful idea of connecting with nature, nature can be a deadly force, of course, and can put us into dangerous situations.
Yeah.
However, we also have this beautiful ability to listen to the divine, to listen to God, to listen to Creator. And I do believe that we will be guided to where we need to go if we're willing to
Yeah.
listen. And that day, had I not listened when I heard the words start walking, even though it didn't make sense, had I not listened to that, we would have missed the truck, Fiona.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
would have never seen that truck had I not left when I did. So, it's just such a beautiful example of this natural ability for the ego and the fight or flight to kick in, but also this other part of us that is so intuitive and so brilliant in this other way that if we can just lean into that and listen to that, that we can change the course of what we think the reality to be.
I think that's really important. And I know that's something that I find is like being in nature is somewhere that we can practice that kind of those sort of skills, really, for want of another word. It's like it gives us that space to kind of just slow down enough and breathe. And yeah, it's so difficult, isn't it, sometimes to find the words to describe, I think, whether it's the energy of, everything that's around us that we can also, feel awareness for, even if we're not sort of really aware of that. It's just that is where you can hone some of these skills, isn't it? And really, and I think quite often people have those kind of experiences like you have when they are in that sort of real sort of natural sort of environment, and it gives them that opportunity to actually tap into, I don't know, the sort of deeper innate wisdom that is there in the world and within us, isn't it?
Oh, it's so true. I think that there's this stillness, yet this music that is played
Yeah.
through being with nature and being connected with nature. And, I think that if we allow ourselves this opportunity to connect with it, we actually get to know ourselves better as
Yeah.
well. When we think about it, I mean, we're all actually connected, right?
Yeah.
We all share consciousness together. And that includes the materials, the chair I'm sitting on, the desk I'm at. It includes all of that too. And so it's starting to witness that divine or God, source energy, is in all things. And when we begin to witness that in everything, it's like it deepens our compassion, it deepens our regard and our respect. It deepens our ability to honor ourselves, but also honor other people. And so for me, nature has been one of my greatest teachers and my greatest allies to show me, well, really to show me that awe and wonder still exists.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I love the idea of awe and wonder. I love talking about it because nature has given me some of the most profound, enlightening experiences of my life. I had spent some time in New Zealand as well, and I had gone with a bunch of scuba divers, but I was staying on the boat, kind of manning the boat. And while the scuba divers were doing their thing underneath, I decided I was going to go for a swim. And so I hop in the water and I'm swimming, la di da, and I look around and there are hundreds of poisonous jellyfish surrounding me. Seriously. And somehow I made it back to the boat.
Yeah.
Like it was just like they knew enough that they were just hanging out and they were going to leave me alone. And you hear stories all the time about, people being lost in the ocean and dolphins surrounding them to protect them from sharks. And like there's just such a beautiful, beautiful opportunity for us to really witness the miracles and the magic and understand how connected and how divine we really are. And to me, that's what nature does for me. It brings in the awe and the wonder. It reminds me of the miracles and the magic in the world because it's really hard when we're in the grind of the day
Yeah.
to day. You're like raising families and working and all of the things. Like, we get so caught up in that. And then we forget about this potency that exists. And so that's what nature really does for me. It reminds me of the miracles and the magic.
Yeah.
And if I'm ever feeling down, that's my place to go to remind me of that awe and wonder.
Yeah, I love that. I think I had a guest a while ago now, and she does forest bathing, and one of the things we talked
Mm,
about was awe walks, which is like being out in nature and deliberately looking for things that bring you awe and wonder. And
yeah.
it is just this great practice. And yeah, I think the thing that I find with nature is it's like it allows you to disconnect from the busyness, but at the same time you connect in a way that you can't do. And it's sort of like you're disconnected, but you're actually more deeply connected than anywhere else. And yeah, I think I mean that's this is kind of what you do is you're connecting to the divine as is your term for it. I mean there are
Yes.
lots of terms that people can use depending on their spiritual orientation or science or, or however. I
Yes.
mean it's overarching for all of us, isn't it? But it just does allow us to get in touch with, I guess, the power that's within us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Oh, yeah. This
yeah,
is,
and I
this
think,
is, I love talking about the power within us
yeah,
because we
it's a
all
really
have it.
big, yeah, it's a really big topic for me is empowering people. And I think like it's one of the challenges. I mean, my podcast is particularly focused on nature and people's feelings around the natural environment and wanting to help. And a lot of people feel very disempowered around
Mm,
the situation around the state of the environment and nature, and
yes.
they feel powerless to help. And that's one of the key themes for me has been this sense of helping people realize that they have like a lot more power and getting them back into that state of empowerment. And yeah.
This is my life's work, Fiona, because I think for so many years, centuries, thousands of years, we have given our power away.
Yeah.
And we've been taught to give our power
Yeah.
away, right? We've been
Yeah.
taught to believe in this expert. We've been taught to disregard our intuition and to trust, more of the logic. But the reality is that our intuition knows things far before our mind even does.
Yeah.
And our intuition is our higher self or the high mind, the God mind, again, whatever you call that higher level of consciousness. And we all have that. We all have access. Some would even say we have God within us, right? That we have
Yeah.
divine within us. We are extensions of the divine. And so allowing ourselves to build a relationship, that's the most natural relationship, by the way,
Yeah.
is that relationship with Source, with
Yeah.
God. And so there's a big invitation on the table for all of us as we move through this journey to work on that relationship. Because what happens is we have this extrinsic world, of course, right? And we see the chaos and we see the stuff that maybe we don't love out there. And we think, how can I change this? We can change it by changing our relationship within ourselves. That really is where the secret is. That's where the magic is. If I work on changing this relationship with myself and I embrace this relationship with divine within me, what happens is something miraculous. I open up this channel to receiving all that God or again divine has in store for me. I open up the understandings and new perceptions in which I can view the world. So now all of a sudden, the world outside of me doesn't feel so ominous and doesn't feel so dark and doesn't feel so scary. But not only that, by me changing that dynamic in that relationship, I'm now vibrating at a higher frequency, which actually increases the frequency of the entire consciousness. We forget, we think that we have to do a thing or fight for a thing, or you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
really,
Yeah.
our job is to build and nurture this beautiful relationship that we have with divine within us. And
Yeah.
if we just all did that one thing, if that was like all of our focus and we could spend the time to do that, I'm telling you, there would not be war, there would not be violence, there would be this beautiful understanding and compassion for all of humanity. And so it's a really big invitation. And it might sound like, oh, well, that's easy. I'll just build a relationship with myself. It's not that easy. It takes practice and it
Yeah.
takes focus because it's so easy to get distracted with the out here, right?
Yeah.
And so, people often ask me, they're like, okay, well, how do I even start that relationship? Like, what does it even look like? Like, thanks, go inward, but like, what does that really mean?
Yeah, and it's
Um,
quite frightening as well, I think, if you've never sort of, peeked behind the curtain, as it were,
Yeah,
and
well, I thought I was going to pull out all sorts of
yeah.
skeletons, like, and we do absurd things to avoid going into our soul. We do. Because
Yeah.
you're right, it feels scary to go there too. But I'm telling you, it's a lot scarier to not go there and to just be walking through this world, aimlessly or feeling all of the heaviness and the density of it. So, I just want to tell people like to go inward doesn't mean you have to unpack all of the trauma and the horror. To go inward doesn't mean you even have to walk the dark night of the soul, although many people will go through some sort of something.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, it's meant to be a catalyst for deeper understanding and for letting go of the things that you've been maybe holding inside of you that are causing damage to you and to your physical body, perhaps even. So, one of the things that I love to start with is to simply start by giving your God self a name. When you recognize you're a multidimensional being and you give
Yeah.
your God self a name, now you can build a relationship to that aspect of your being and you can start stepping into that a bit more. So I'll give you the example. My name, Rose Hope, is not my birth name. Rose Hope is the name of my divine self. So she is the one that speaks on behalf of me. She's the one that writes on behalf of me. And so my birth name being Deanne, I will still be Deanne. That's not gone. But being able to step into this aspect of me, this dimension of me, really allows me to nurture that relationship because now I'm not getting all muddled within myself,
Yeah.
right? And so now I can start to see from a conscious perspective that there's different dimensions and okay, I'm going to build a relationship with that. So I talk to Rose. I say, good morning, Rose. How are you? I love you so much. What are we
Yeah.
doing today? Right? And I nurture that relationship. And because of that, that part of myself says, oh, she loves me. Yes. And it vibrates higher. Now, the same goes for our ego self, the ego self, the false self. Okay. I know someone that calls that the earth generating operating system, ego, right? And so that ego, the logical mind or the false self, that is there for a reason as well. And a lot of people think they have to go through some ego death and get rid of their ego. We need our ego. It's what tells us to run from the bad guys, right? It's what keeps us alive. But over thousands of years, what most of us have done is we've allowed that ego to take over. So the ego hijacks our mind now, and
Yeah.
the ego comes in, and the ego tells us this, that, and the other thing. And we end up believing it most of the time. And in fact, I want to share a little side story because this is how powerful our ego is. I was working, finishing up a degree. I have a degree in health management, took it in my 20s, and I was on my final exam of my final class, like home stretch, finish line kind of thing, right? And I'm writing this exam, and my ego's kicking in because I had actually failed a test in a previous class, even though I rewrote the exam
Oh, wow. Okay.
successfully. I
Yeah.
had failed for the first time. I had never failed a test before. So now I'm writing this final test, and the ego's coming in. It's like, you're going to fail again. You're going to have to rewrite. You don't know the answers. And so this is playing in the background as I'm writing this exam. Well, by the time I was finished the exam, I knew I had failed the test. I get to my car, I bawl my eyes out. I'm like so upset that I've bombed this test. I get home and I email my professor because I'm so worked up about it. And I said, I know I failed this exam. Can you tell me the areas that I need to work on so that I can start preparing for the rewrite?
Yeah.
And my professor emails me back. She goes, I don't know whose test you think you wrote, but you got 87%. This is what the ego mind does.
Yeah.
It tells us the story and then we hook into it and then we suffer because of it.
Yeah.
What if we are meant to run the ego, not the other way around? And that is the truth. We are meant to run the ego. And so now, if we can allow ourselves to be in that position, now we can start to say, oh, is that even a true story? Am I really going to believe that? Am I going to buy into that story, into that narrative? Or you can even invite for more information. You can say, okay, where is this really coming from? Right? Is there a
Yeah.
root to why you're telling me about this person or you're telling me about this situation going to be this way or whatever? And so now all of a sudden we build this relationship with the ego self. And so I invite you to do the same thing. Give your ego a name. Give it a name. And so now you've got your ego self, you've got your high self, and you get to be the mediator. You get to be the magician behind the scenes,
Yeah.
right? Deciding what is it that is true and what isn't, instead of just getting falling into the trap of just taking whatever is coming in and letting it run the show. So, I mean, it's a beautiful process when we can start to see ourselves in this multidimensional way.
Yeah.
And it gives us this opportunity for discernment. It gives us this opportunity for us to step into our most divine path. And again, what's going to happen is you're going to feel more joy and more peace. You're going to have less anxiety and less worry, and all of that falls away. And then you're going to vibrate higher. You're going to shine brighter, and people are going to look at you and they're going to say, "Okay, I want what they're having." I want that relationship too because they're having a good time over there and I want that. That's how we change the world.
Yeah. I love that because it's I had a guest before and she said it's simple but it's not easy, and I think that's that's what it is, isn't it? And it's like I love the idea of giving your divine self a name as well, because I think it's you can then really feel this sense of like building a relationship with
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
yourself, but in a way that's a lot easier because you can set aside some of your baggage, can't you, as well?
You
You can go, well,
can.
here's the baggage over here,
Yes.
and
And
I'm here, and then there's this other aspect of myself that I want to get to know over there, and yeah, it's I can imagine it's really freeing actually to
it
do that.
is.
Yeah.
It's such a liberating feeling. And really, some people will call this being in the observer standpoint or the
Yeah.
witness,
Okay.
right? So allowing yourself to be the witness of yourself,
Yeah.
right? And we forget to do that. We haven't been taught to do that, right? And so it's this, yeah, it's this beautiful opportunity for us to really start taking our power back, because that's where we lose our power, is in the jumbling of who am I, and trying to understand these aspects of ourselves. And we
Yeah.
get kind of lost in that. And so this allows us to create that, separation within ourselves, to then be able to say, oh, okay, my intuition is saying this. I can lean into that because my ego is full of garbage. It's not telling me the truth about this right now. And lovingly still loving the ego for what it is, because we do need to have some certain level of logic so that I'm not running into traffic,
Yeah.
or something like that, right? So we need that aspect of us so we can honor it and we can love it, but we can set boundaries with that ego self. And when we set those boundaries, oh goodness, it just opens up the channel for divine to be able to supply us with the information, with the insights, and all of the things that we are really craving in our lives.
I think you mentioned a couple of times, and it's about like the vibration, and you've talked about like the consciousness of, I guess, mass consciousness, like
Yeah.
we call it that, which is pretty heavy at the moment, given some of what's happened. The recent election in the US, for example, has thrown a tailspin to a lot of people, regardless of where your political affiliations lie. It does send this sort of vibrational ripple out that those of us that are perhaps a bit more sensitive will be aware of,
Mm.
this sort of
Yeah.
heaviness. And I think what you're saying about like sort of having that opportunity to know that just being in control of ourselves, elevating ourselves actually does help the collective as well, is a really important thing at these times of real sort of uncertainty, a lot of
Yeah.
fear, to just hang on to and remember that you do have power over that and over your sort of reaction to it, and staying in your center, I guess, really, and that power within you again, coming back to that. Um,
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought this up, because there is a lot of people that are in fear or feeling the chaos, like this world is going to hell in a handbasket kind of
yeah,
perspective. And I want to share a couple things about that. The first thing is that we have a tendency of taking on a lot of energy that isn't ours.
yeah,
And we do have a choice. This is still a choose your own adventure. And so there are things that we can be more mindful of, like feeding ourselves the news and feeding ourselves social media. Is it positive? Is it healthy? Is it serving your highest good? But also to set some healthy, energetic boundaries around that. So, what I love to do for people who feel like they feel the overwhelm or the weight of the world on their shoulders, there's this beautiful technique, and it works incredibly well. We all have this energy field around us. We know this by science, right? Most of the people that are empathic, meaning they're more sensitive to energy, like you are, Fiona. I know you're an empath, you feel things. And so most of us as empaths, we spread out our energy field really big. So that
yeah,
means we could even go to the grocery store, and the people that are like grumbling about Trump or whatever, they're dumping that negative energy there. And they're not doing it intentionally. This is just a natural, organic process of nature itself. And so this dumps in there. And then you take all this stuff home, and then you feel like anxious and heavy and ugh. And you're like, why do I feel so ugh? And it's because you've taken on all this energy that isn't even yours.
yeah,
So, one of the first things I love to do is to dust myself. So, if I go out in public and I feel heavy, I do what I call the dusting, like as if I have like sawdust on me or something. I
yeah,
just dust my whole body off, and I set the intention that anything that is not mine, anything not serving my highest good, I send you away with light and love, or whatever you want to say.
yeah,
But if you want to create the boundary before you go out into the world, you bring in your energy field first and foremost. Your energy field does not need to be the size of the room. Bring in your energy field. And all you need to do is imagine the energy field 1 to 2 feet around you, like an egg shell around you. Or you can use your arms as well, and just bring your arms in closer to you. And so when you do that, you're already creating less space for people to dump their stuff in there.
yeah,
But more than that, More than that, you set an intention. And this is the intention that I love to set. I only allow energy serving me at my highest good into my sacred space. I only allow energy serving me at my highest good into my sacred space. And I say that with authority and conviction, and
Yeah.
then I am fine. So I started doing that about a decade ago when I started doing readings because I would get home and feel so exhausted from doing readings and oh my gosh, and taking on everyone's garbage and it was exhausting. I thought, how can people do this? Like, I can't, this isn't sustainable.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the techniques that I used, and it really saved the game for me. So I encourage that. And so that's one important piece. The other thing that I want to share with people, and this is tough for a lot of people to understand and receive. So if I trigger anybody, I'm sorry, please reach out after. But here's the thing. Anyone who is put in a position of power is meant to be in that position. And what I mean by this is that there is this bigger plan that we do not understand, that we cannot see all of. When we reject an authority figure or we reject what is, we cannot receive the benefit or the value intended for us. In other words, we actually block the value. So what I want to encourage people to do is rather than getting upset and resisting and feeling whatever they're feeling about what's happening in the world, there's an opportunity to say, what is in this for me?
Yeah.
What can I gain out of this? What can I learn? What value is there in this for me? And so when we do that, we don't have to agree with the person and how they are. Okay? But we do have to accept that that is what has taken place because
Yeah.
there's not a whole lot we can do to really change what is there? But what we can do is we can change our perception of it and we can change how much value we can receive in it. I had a friend once who was very upset that they hired an executive director that she didn't feel was worthy of that role. And she was beneath the executive director. And so
Okay.
she was
Yeah.
upset that this executive director was hired. And the whole time it was like stressing her out. And there was all this extra work and she was complaining about it. And I said, you've got to change your perspective. Like, what if you could get so much more of this? What if this is teaching you other skills? Da 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 da. She couldn't get herself there. And so what happened? She lost her job
Yeah.
because she had such resistance to that. Instead of surrendering to what was and receiving the value from that person and that experience, she ended up having to shift and leave to go somewhere else, right? So, we have this wonderful opportunity to open ourselves up to this acceptance and the receiving. And that doesn't mean be complacent. That
Yeah.
doesn't mean grow apathetic about it. It means for you to lean in and say, okay, what is in this for me? And how can I make this better in my own way? And that could mean writing letters. That can
I was
mean,
going to say it could be also the almost the opposite of apathetic, couldn't it? It could be like, you know, this has happened to awaken the fire within, it's
yeah,
like,
like
you know, yeah,
use that power. Like if you're
yeah,
feeling worked up about it, leverage that,
yeah,
right? Like leverage that, use that as a catalyst for something greater. Maybe you want to start creating a community of people together. What if you
yeah,
want to bring people together? What if it's an opportunity to again also look at other people with the lens of compassion instead of judgment?
yeah,
We're judging this human being like crazy. Could you imagine what it would feel like to be under attack and under judgment like that? Like I get judged by somebody, like just a little judgment of like whatever it might be, and it like devastates me. Like
yeah,
it's like it's like, oh my God, they think that I'm crazy. What? You
yeah,
know? And it's devastating. So just imagine how that feels for somebody else. And so there's this opportunity of deeper compassion and falling away from judgment. We've
yeah,
got such division, and yet the invitation is for us to actually just love one another where we're at.
yeah,
Everyone's doing the best that they know how. Everyone's showing up exactly the way that they're supposed to for our learning, for their learning, for the growth of humanity. And when we can start to see that rather than judging people as being right or wrong, good or bad, whatever it is, oh man, it actually liberates us. It liberates us. And I'm not saying that I'm free from judgment. I judge people too. But I'm telling you, every time that I have placed judgment on somebody, do you know what? It's actually been a mirror for me.
Yeah.
And judgment is a wonderful mirror. So if you're judging somebody for showing up a certain way, I want to invite you to flip that around. And this isn't to beat ourselves up, but rather to look at it and say, oh my gosh, I was judging this person for showing up a certain way. And maybe I'm realizing that I'm judging them because I actually want to be able to show up that way and I can't, right? Or maybe I'm judging them because there's something inside of me that needs some looking at a little bit closer,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And so, for all the people that are struggling with what's happening in the world, and I mean, and there's wars happening, and there's other things, there's natural disasters happening. Our role in that is to think about where can I gain value in this? Because there's value in everything, even in the darkest of experiences, there is value in that. And I know it's easier said than done when we're not in the valley of despair. When you're in it, it's
Yeah.
really hard for you to say, oh, what can I win here? What can I gain here? When you're
Yeah.
like crying and like in this dark place.
Yeah.
But I will promise you that you will move through that space much deeper if you're willing to say, I know there's something in here for me. What is it? And to be curious about what that is. This summer I had pneumonia this summer. I was really, really sick,
Oh, wow.
made it into the hospital and everything.
Oh, wow.
And there were times when I couldn't breathe. So what would happen is I would cough and I'd go to breathe in and I couldn't breathe. So I was also on an inhaler and all these steroids and all this stuff. I was really sick. And I remember feeling like, I think I'm going to die. Like, I can't breathe. Like, what is happening? I had to dig really, really deep, Fiona. And what I recognized is that I had so much grief that I had packed away.
Yeah.
I had lost 22 people, loved ones, aunts, uncles, grandparents, friends, since I was about 12 years old.
Yeah.
And so over the span of 30 years, that's almost like one person a year that I
Yeah.
loved deeply that had
Yeah.
died. I had never dealt with it. I had never processed any of those deaths. So this summer, as I am going through this major lung thing and, experiencing this illness, it was so incredible to see this grief bubble to the surface. That was the root cause of my illness. I know that. So
Yeah.
as soon as I held space for the grief, as soon as I honored the grief, as soon as I said, okay, this is not easy. I cried every day, I think for about 2 months, you know? And
That's yeah.
so I just I surrendered to what I was feeling emotionally about it, the loss of these experiences and these people and all of it. And had I not done that, I'd probably still be sick.
Yeah.
Had I not done that, I would still have these layers that would pop up from time to time. And so I held space lovingly for that grief. And we have this, again, we judge things, right? We say, oh, grief and hate and resentment and guilt and shame, they're all low vibration.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're
Yeah.
like, oh, low vibration, ah. But here's the thing. There's an invitation again for us to come and look at it from a neutral perspective, not from a judging perspective, but to say, what does the grief have to show me?
Yeah.
What is the grief showing me? And that's what I asked. I asked the question of the grief. I said, hi, grief. I befriended the grief too. Just like we befriend those aspects of ourselves, we befriend these emotions too. And so I held my hands, I cupped my hands like this, like I was holding a cute little bird. And I said, oh, hi, grief. I was bawling while I did this, by the way. Oh, hi, grief. You know, I see you and I know that you're here to show me something. And I was shown all of these memories of love that I had with these people.
Yeah.
I was shown all these tender moments. I was shown compassion that I have now for other people who've experienced loss that I wouldn't have understood otherwise. So
Yeah.
all of this stuff started bubbling to the surface. All of this learning, all this understanding started to show up for me. And as soon as I did that, that grief was like, oh, I'm not so heavy and dense and bad, am I?
Yeah.
And it's not. So there's potency in what we perceive as low vibration energies as well.
Yeah.
And
I
if we
think
can
it's
see
we
them
have
in
to have
that
this
way,
whole we need the whole range, don't we? This is the thing. It's like, it's as bad to get, stuck in in the top as it is to get stuck in the bottom.
Yeah.
Not necessarily bad or good, but yeah, it's I think it's really, I mean, that sort of ties us a little bit back to your book that's just been released as well, doesn't it? Because talking about death, and actually your book, The Arc, that has just come out, covers near death experiences as well, doesn't it? Which you've had personally, and your learnings from that. And
Yes, it does. I have had quite an experience, and I just realized usually I have my book up in the background, but I see that it's fallen down. But this is that book, The Ark, and so I've had two near-death experiences. I've had some very interesting stories tied to death, actually. Death has been profound in my life, my own near deaths. And then I've had a lot of instances where I could have died, being stranded in Mexico in the desert being,
yeah,
one of those situations. And so I've really nurtured this relationship with what death means and
okay,
redefined it for myself. And I really see it as a rebirth. I'm not afraid to die. When I had my near deaths, my second one in particular was really profound. I was 26 years old recovering from knee surgery, so it wasn't anything like traumatic necessarily.
yeah, okay,
But something happened. I went unresponsive due to some of the medication, is what we suspect. And so I went completely unresponsive. My brother-in-law was with me at the time. And when I went unresponsive, Fiona, something so profound happened. I was surrounded by these beautiful angels of light.
Mm.
They were the
Wow.
most vibrant, beautiful colors you can even imagine. They they brought in this energy of complete love. Like I felt like I was held in the arms of God. I felt unconditional love, completely safe, complete peace, euphoria beyond measure. Okay. Like so euphoric. I remember thinking when I was there, I'm staying. This is amazing. I'm going to stay here. And
Keep me. Yeah.
they very quickly responded with, "You have work to do. You're not staying here."
Yeah.
But that experience really moved me. When I came to, I was afraid to tell people that it happened. I
Yeah.
and many of us do this, right? We have experiences or stories and we're afraid to share them because we're afraid of the judgment. And so I didn't know how to express to my brother-in-law what had happened to me. So I just kept my mouth shut. But in the days to follow that experience, I felt so compelled. I was like, I need to talk about this. I need to talk to someone about this. And so I'm in the kitchen telling a girlfriend a few days after, I'm still recovering from the surgery. And I'm telling my girlfriend because I feel safe with her. And
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I got to tell you this. Please don't think I'm crazy, but like I went to heaven and I was with angels. Like here's what happened. And as I'm telling her the story, my brother-in-law, who I lived with at the time, came running into the kitchen, slammed his hand on the counter. He says, I knew it. I felt the angels too.
Oh, wow.
So
Wow.
his experience was that when I went unresponsive, he couldn't find a pulse. It didn't look like I was breathing. He was about to call 911. Like he was
Yeah.
panicking. He's like, I don't
Yeah.
know what to do. Ah. And he said he felt them come in and they said to him in his mind, she's going to be fine. Just wait. And so he crouched beside me and he just sat there and he waited. And he said,
Oh,
within a
wow.
few seconds, he said it felt like minutes, but within a few seconds, he said, I opened my eyes with a smile on my face.
Oh, wow.
So he really validated that experience for me. And
Yeah.
after that, I said, okay, God, I know I've got to talk about this. I need to share this experience. So this is actually where the book really started to come together. So this was about 20 years ago. So I've been working on this book for about 20 years. And so the book, though, as I wrote it, even though at first I wrote it as my own story, as I was writing it, God really guided me and said, like, this isn't your story. It's the story for the world. And
Okay.
so I decided to do it through the lens of a character. And so it is technically a fantasy fiction, but it's based on my real life experiences and real characters in my life. So it's been a beautiful process because much of the book has been channeled. The stories and the experience that the character Celeste has in the book, they are again based on my experiences, but they bring it into a whole nother level. So the character has near-death experiences, and then she goes into the angel realm and she spends time in the angel kingdom. and she gets to know the angels, her guardian angels, and they teach her things and they show her things. They bring her into a grand library, which we know here as the Akashic Records, your soul's
Okay. Yeah.
library. So she goes into that library space inside of the Ark, the angel kingdom, and she gets to learn all these beautiful, wonderful things, and then hopefully bring them back to the rest of humanity. So it's a beautiful story, and it's fun and it's whimsical and it's magical. And my intention with writing it was that I wanted people when they were done to remember who they were.
Mm.
So it is a book of, as you read it, you're going to remember some things about yourself and who you are and why you're here. And it's also the first of three. So
Wow.
it is going to end you on a little cliffhanger there. So
Are we
yeah,
in I sort of, as you were talking, the books that sort of sprang to mind were the Celestine Prophecy and The
yes,
Alchemist, that kind
those are
of
the two
genre
books.
of, yeah,
Yes, those
yeah,
are my two inspirations.
yeah,
So, James Redfield, who wrote the Celestine Prophecy, beautiful human being, just love that man. And yeah, that book and how he shared his stories was much about what I felt compelled to do. I wanted to tell
yeah,
this really fun, beautiful story, but with these beautiful wisdom nuggets that could really inspire and move somebody. And the same with The Alchemist. The Alchemist is still my favorite book. Um, and so, again, bringing us on a journey and experience. And I felt that that was really important. So that those two books were inspiration for this book.
Oh, lovely. I love that. I mean, I'm very fortunate that I get to talk to quite a few authors and being a creative myself as well, I feel like the as creatives, we kind of have this huge responsibility in the world at this time because we have this way of delivering this information and ideas in a way that is accessible to people. And that's why I love the fact that yours is actually like a fantasy because sometimes that just, I don't know, it allows you to speak to people in a way that's just less confronting, I suppose, is probably the way to look at it, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, it's kind of like it acts as a bit of a bridge, I
Yeah.
think. And that's how I would describe it. Is
Yeah.
like, we're leaning into this magical space, but like bringing it into our three-dimensional reality and into our heart and into our truth to see if it resonates, right? So, yeah, I think it's a beautiful way to just open up these conversations and open up our ideas and really get to the heart of our truth.
Yeah, I think that's what's really important because I think sometimes it's quite easy for people, particularly at the moment, to get offended and get entrenched in their
Yes.
position, isn't it? And it's a way of just like I love that word, the bridge, bridging to people in wherever they are now. And I think it's one of the I mean, I love the two books that you have said were your inspiration. They're books that you can go back to again and again and again. And every time you read them, you're in a different place and you get different nuggets of wisdom from them.
So
And
true.
I'm excited to have well, it's going to be a trilogy, isn't it, of
Yes,
wisdom out in
indeed.
the world doing the same. And it's I don't know, it's just it's exciting to have this in the world and know that there are people out there like yourself. But I feel like I just want to do you a little bit of justice and I wanted to like circle a little bit back to like some of the things
Sure.
that we haven't talked about because you have this amazing like story as well of actually you set up a whole like holistic health business, but you have also
Yeah.
this amazing like science background and you were in like emergency medicine as well. So you have, you
Yes.
know, our conversation so far has been very much sort of in this sphere of the divine, which I know is like the space that you are in now, but I feel like it would do you justice to the listeners who might not have come across you before to like actually just kind of paint the bigger tapestry of who you are and how you've got to this place. If
Oh,
you'd
well,
like to
thank
share a little
you.
bit about that would be lovely.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, I think it is important to share this because, so my first near death, I was only 5.
Mm.
So I choked. My dad saved my life. And as a result of that near death, I felt like I needed to prove my worth, that it was like God made the right choice by giving me a second chance. So I became an overachiever, people pleaser. And so I excelled in school. By grade 4, actually, I was the president of the Kids for Saving Earth Club. Like,
Oh,
I had a
wow.
mission to save the world too,
Yeah.
okay? Like I was on a mission. And because of my dad inspiring me and saving my life, I knew I wanted to save the lives of others. So I became an EMT firefighter. That was my first career. I remember celebrating my 19th birthday on the last day of my practicum.
Oh, wow.
Um, and
Wow.
so I started really early. So I was seeing things and a lot of death and a lot of trauma at a very young age in that. But what was interesting is like I was very intuitive as a kid, but I had shut that down
Okay.
because I was raised Catholic, didn't really know what to do with
Yeah.
it, felt a little different than everybody else, I felt like I was weird. So I just shut all of that down. But when I was in EMS, I would have spirits come home with me.
Oh,
And
wow. Okay.
I would think to myself, like, I'm really losing it, right? Like I was a science junkie as well. So I
Yeah.
wasn't into all of this woo-woo. I was very based on the science of things and logical reasoning and all of that. And so as I would feel such EBGBs, I mean, I remember one night coming home after a call. The woman was already deceased when we got there, but I had to spend a lot of time with her body and help the police take pictures and what
Okay.
have you, like the
Yeah.
processing of it. And I felt such EBGBs after that. Like I'm sure I had like 7 or 8 showers that night because I felt just like, oh no, it's still not, oh, I still felt weird.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so these energies started to come home with me. And I thought, you know what? I cannot stay in this profession. Like I'm losing my mind. I must have PTSD, like self-diagnose myself.
Yeah.
And so I decided to switch careers. I ended up in the dental field and then health sciences. So I actually taught at our colleges here in Alberta for about 8 years. And I loved teaching. I loved teaching. But again, was really caught up in this rat race, right? Of
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
achievement, achievement,
Okay.
please, please, please do everything you're supposed to
Yeah.
do. So when I had my second near death at 26, I was still teaching. And a lot of people are like, oh, well, you had the second near death. Now you're enlightened. Now you've got it figured out. No, that wasn't the case, folks. It took me a lot still. So after the second near death, well, now I really felt like I had something to prove, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And also, I wanted to go back to that heavenly place.
Yeah.
So I went on the hunt for heaven. However, I was looking everywhere but inside of myself.
Yeah.
I thought, I'll be happy when. Have you played that game? I'll be
Yeah.
happy
Yeah.
when. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a losing game, everybody. Don't play that game. But I played the I'll be happy when game, and I'll be happy when I get married and have my kids. I'll be happy when I achieve this level of success in my career. I'll be happy when. And in fact, I ended up more miserable than ever before. And so, about 5 years after that second near death, I was 6 months postpartum. I had my second child,
Yeah.
and I was in a very deep and dark depression, very deep and dark. And I had decided that I was going to take my life because it would be easier on my family, it would be easier for me. Like that's how much despair I was
Yeah.
in. I was in a lot of emotional pain. And I felt like I had failed. I felt like I can't find heaven. Like I'm doing something wrong.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to go back to that heavenly place that I had been to
Yeah.
before. This does happen, by the way, to a lot of near-death survivors where we feel like we just want to go back to that
You
place and
sort
we
of
can't
split
find it
almost
here.
in, yeah.
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 Yeah. So, anyways, so I prayed. I prayed that night because I was starting to plan out how I was going to do the thing. And so I said, okay, God, this is the only path I see. If there's another path, you need to show me now. Like, you need to show me. I demanded that God showed me another path.
Yeah.
And Fiona, the most beautiful thing happened. I was visited by what I can only describe as an angel. And that angel showed me a vision to create a holistic healthcare system.
Oh, wow.
Now, I had the medical background. I had a degree in
Yeah.
health
Yeah.
administration and
Yeah.
management. You know, and I had gone through my own health journey. My whole life, I had struggled with my health as well.
Yeah.
So it was like a beautiful blend. And I was like, this is it. This is my divine purpose. And so I literally got up the next morning, and I was like a whole different person. And I said to my husband at the time, I said, this is what I'm going to do. Here's my idea. And he said, I think this is the best idea you've ever had. Like, go for it. And so I started building that company. And I loved building that company, building community, but I was also still people pleasing, working my butt off.
Yeah.
And so after after the first couple years, I started to uncover a lot of these spiritual teachers and these healers. And I was like, this is so fascinating. And I'm like, there's no way you can read energy and you can, like who can do this? Again, my science mind, right?
Yeah.
So I decided I was going to take the Akashic records and I went in as a skeptic. I
Yeah.
was going in to prove that you couldn't really do this stuff. And let me tell you, was I ever proved wrong? I went into that class and I was mind blown at what I knew. So I started practicing reading for people, and it was just like, how do I know this? I don't know. And so all of a sudden, I started to see all of this magic that I had that I'd stuffed away from childhood, all of this
Mm.
intuition, all of these gifts of clairvoyancy, clairaudience, like all of these sensitivities that I had were such incredible gifts. They weren't curses, they were gifts.
Yeah.
And so I started to lean into that. And so as I was building the holistic healthcare system, I was also building the spiritual side business. And at one point, I got to the fork in the roads because I was getting tired. I was still working hard, and trying to get, the holistic thing going and all of that. And I was able to build it to a successful organization with thousands of members in it.
Wow.
But Spirit said, you have to make a decision. Are you going to keep building this, or are you going to become the spiritual teacher and student that you really are meant to be?
Yeah.
And I knew so clearly what I needed to do. And it was to lean into the spiritual business and to lean into that connection that I had with God, and how to show people how they can create heaven on earth and help them to recognize it's not outside of us. We have to create heaven within us in order
Yeah.
to then share it with the world or experience it in the world. So, needless to say, Spirit guided me to gift that company.
Oh,
So I
this is
held
an
a
amazing story. I
contest.
love this.
I held a contest like Willy Wonka style. There was no golden tickets though, but people had to apply. They had to write an essay. They then had to do like certain tasks and things in order to get points. And then I chose a winner at the end of it all. And so it was such a beautiful process for me. And then people thought I was crazy. They're like, you're going to give away this company that you put hundreds of thousands of dollars and hours into? Like, are you
Yeah.
nuts? They thought
Yeah.
I was nuts.
Yeah.
And I just knew that that was the right thing to do because that company, Your Holistic Earth, was such a gift for me. Had I
Yeah.
not, that company saved me.
I was going to
It
say it
saved
saved your
my
life.
life.
It saved,
It
yeah.
saved my life.
Yeah.
It literally saved my life. And not
Yeah.
only that, it gave me the path forward as well.
Yeah.
So I couldn't justify selling it. It felt wrong for
Yeah.
me to do that.
Yeah.
So giving it away felt really enriching for me, and it was such a gift for me giving it away. And so, that company it no longer exists anymore, but it has evolved into whatever it needs to have evolved to. And I'm really happy that somebody else got to experience the love and clarify their path and go on their journey with that organization. And since then, by the way, there's lots of different holistic communities and
Yeah.
things like that have now popped up. So that's the power of collective consciousness. Again, like once you kind of get that traction going, then we start to see all of the others kind of pop in. And so we're seeing that continuous shift and more people that are, using natural medicines or alternative medicines that supplement our medical system as it exists now. So it's really beautiful to see that. And yeah, so
Yeah.
that's a bit of the backstory there.
I loved it, and
Yeah.
I just wanted you to share because I love the fact that you were like the science cynic, really going in there, and I think
Totally.
it's important for people to hear that because I think there's a lot of people that are cynical about this sort of this energy work, this
Yeah.
deeper
The
connection with
woo-woo,
our
as we
intro.
call it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's like, and it's it's like you have this science background, like you've brought this science background to that, you've brought that education and experience, and you're like, this is amazing. This is like, I might not have the science to explain it all. And I think that's really the point we're at. The
Yeah.
science isn't there to explain it all, but it doesn't mean that it's not real and it's not there.
Exactly. And the science is catching up. Like,
Yeah.
we start talking about quantum physics, quantum entanglement, metaphysics. The science is starting to catch up, where we're starting to understand that there's so much more, that there is more than meets the eye, and see the world through a more energetic lens instead of getting caught up in the three-dimensional kind of tangible nature that we most of us have been. So, yeah, thanks for allowing me to share that, because I definitely was on the other side of that,
Yeah.
right? And I get it. I get it. I was a skeptic myself. But now that I've opened up this gateway, oh man, I just love what I do, and I have the pleasure of being able to live and experience heaven as I move through my world, because I've allowed myself to lean into what heaven is inside of me. And so my world is reflected back to me in that way. And so it's a beautiful way to be moving through this world. And it
Yeah.
doesn't mean that it doesn't come with, I still get upset and triggered, okay? I'm still
Yeah.
human. But my perception of the triggering and my perception of whatever drama or whatever trauma shows up for me is different than most. And I can see the value in that experience. And so that's a big invitation for everyone, is to look at the world through the lens of, what is in that for me? Even if it feels
Yeah.
really awful, there's something in there for us. There's value in every experience. There's value in all of it. And our job is to squeeze that value and
Yeah.
receive that value.
Yeah, I love it. I feel like I could talk to you for hours and hours, and I'm getting conscious of the fact that I've probably had you on for about an hour already, and
Ah, it
I just
flew by.
yeah,
Oh man.
I think I'm gonna have to come back and speak to you more, because I know there's so much more depth that we could go into, but I well, firstly, I want to thank you for just your beautiful energy, your
Thank you.
honesty and depth of sharing with us today, talking about, some very personal and subjects that I'm sure will resonate with a lot of people listening. And also just this beautiful message of hope that you hold for all of us, for the future and the possibilities that are out there, and just your whole journey through your life is just a reminder that we don't know what's around the next corner. Like, the possibilities are endless and can be incredible, and our path can change and divert and take amazing forks that can just lead us to incredible destinations we can't even imagine. And I think, for me, that's part of why I have this podcast, is I want to hold that space for people. I want people to know that there are possibilities for our environment, for our societies, for ourselves, that we can't even really imagine at the moment. And there are amazing people out there that are already perhaps a step ahead of us, that we can go and join and collaborate with. And, you know, we are just so much more powerful than we even realize. We're just literally, science is scraping the surface of our human potential. And I think, this is an exciting time really to be alive. And we have to remember that. And through the dark times, and the uncertainty that we face and things that we don't like, we have to, find the gifts like you taught us, and find our way to move towards what we want to create, and hold that prayer and intention and vision. But I just would love to ask you, Rose, if there is something you would like to leave people with, a little, you've given us so much already today, but any sort of little nugget of wisdom, a message on your heart that you would like to share and leave us with would be amazing.
Well, this is a quote that God gave me years ago, and I love it so much because it reminds us that we're being taken care of. And it is this: in every given moment, you have everything you need and then some.
I love that.
That is so powerful in itself, because we forget,
Yeah.
especially when we're in places of despair. We think we've been abandoned, we think we're not supported, but the truth is, in every given moment, we have everything we need and then some. Our job is to know that and
Yeah.
to trust that. And if we can do that,
Yeah.
then we open ourselves up to that receiving.
Yeah.
Divine is our supply.
Yeah.
And divine wants to give us everything possible that we need in order for us to live the most fulfilled life possible. And sometimes the everything we need is not the rainbows and the butterflies. Sometimes the everything we need is the difficult,
Yeah.
mucky stuff.
Yeah.
But if we're willing to see that it's there for a reason and not just 'cause it wants
Yeah.
to create suffering,
Yeah.
then we get to receive the value in it.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I think something else that I got from our conversation is your conversation right at the start with you when you were in Mexico is to remember to ask for help as well.
Oh, isn't
Yeah.
that the truth?
Yeah.
Oh, the help is always there. We
Yeah.
just got to be willing to ask and receive.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's
a
it. The
lot of people
receiving
will
bit is
ask. Yeah, because people will ask and then they're blocking the receiving part. They're like, I
yeah.
want help, but I shouldn't take it,
Yeah. Or it has
Like,
to
no,
come a
take it.
specific way. Yeah.
Yeah, that too, right? It has to
Like you
look like this, right?
yeah, like your
Totally.
angel was a white truck, there were no wings
Exactly.
involved. Yeah.
It didn't need to be, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got it. Oh, it's
Yeah.
so fun. I've loved our conversation, Fiona. Thank you so much.
Oh, well, thank you. I really appreciate it. And I will have the links in the podcast description for everyone to go and have a look at your website, to find your book. I'm sure
Yeah.
that, I encourage everyone to read that. There's lots of ways that people can work with you. And you also have your own podcast as well, don't you? Which people
I
can
do.
listen
Yes,
to.
it's called When Spirit Calls. So we share stories of people when Spirit has called them or leaned them into one direction or another. And there's a gift too in those links too. It's a soul blueprint quiz. So people can explore that. And I'm not sure when this podcast is airing, but in January, we have 7 days of creation every year and it's free. And it's 7 days with me in the Akashic Records. So
Oh,
it's a
wow.
really
Oh,
potent
brilliant.
week as well.
It will be out before then. So if you're listening
Oh,
to
perfect.
this,
We'll make sure you have that link
yeah,
too.
yeah,
Yes.
brilliant.
Amazing.
And they can sign up now for that, can they?
Yes,
Anytime
they
going forward?
can.
Yeah,
You
perfect.
betcha. And if you can't make it live, then you can catch the replays as well.
Oh, amazing. Oh, well, it's been absolutely a pleasure. And
Thank
yeah,
you.
I can't wait for the second and third book as well. So
Yay! Oh, that's what I was hoping for. Thank you so much,
brilliant.
Fiona.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to the Nurtured by Nature podcast. I truly hope this conversation has brought some hope and inspiration into your life. I would love to have these messages ripple out across the world. So if you can, please share this episode with your friends, leave a review on your favourite podcast player, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. I would love to hear from you, so please feel free to connect with me on the links provided in the podcast description. But most importantly, thank you so much for being a part of this journey with me. But don't forget to simply get out there and enjoy the natural world.